Here. Commissioner Jordan.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins.
Here.
Vice Chair Peugeot. Absent. Chair Campanella.
Here. And Vice Chair Peugeot, I understand her daughter is having a baby or getting pretty close to it. Okay, well, that's great. We wish him much health and success. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Galarte, are there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
There are none.
Okay.
There are none, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any announcements or appeals?
The only announcements are that we have a couple of meeting cancellations coming up. The meeting of December 15th is currently canceled, as well as the meeting of January 5th. So the next time the commission will come together is next year on January 12th. And just let you know that there is a special lunch meeting that day. We don't normally have a lunch meeting. So we will be meeting at noon in room 15 on January 12th.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Jordan. Thank you.
Hijack your meeting protocol. I'm always a little annoyed that we do this at the end of the meeting when there's only one staff person left and we're all trying to get out of here, and I'm all the more annoyed that somebody took the opportunity to have a baby today. But June is, Commissioner Peugeot is finishing her term. It would have been today, her last meeting, and I'm sorry she's not here to hear this directly, but she can hear it secondhand or on tape. But I would just like to commend her over the last 4 years for showing up every week, doing her homework, and enthusiastically participating. It's, as all you guys know, and gals, that it's a challenge sometime, whether it's from your wife or somebody in the supermarket line or somebody who you know that gives you grief because 50% of everybody doesn't really understand the decision you made. And I think she's carried herself responsibly and admirably over the last 4 years. And I'm sorry, she's probably not sorry she's here. She's probably happy she's where she is right now with a grandchild coming. But I'd just like to take the opportunity while everybody's still in the room and we're not trying to get out of here to wish her well.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any other announcements and appeals? Any other people up here? Okay. Next is comments from members of the public on an item not on our agenda today. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, we've received a request to speak for some development along Milpas Street that is across the street from this project, but it's not related to this project. So I don't know if they want to speak now because it is not the park project.
Okay.
You can speak now.
So they can either speak now on an, okay.
Hi. I guess this is unrelated, though to me it is related because we have a property across the street.
Could you announce your name, please? Thank you.
Catherine Elmo.
Okay, and you'll have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I'm sorry this isn't actually related, but I consider it related because we have a property across the street from the park, and I know the city is thinking of putting a sidewalk, or perhaps it's already been approved to put a sidewalk. And I've spoken a couple times with people out at the property, and it would take away from all of our front yards, depending on how big you want to put the sidewalk. I know at one time when I talked with some planner, it was 8 feet, and that would just change the whole concept of our property. There'd be no front yard. If it were 3 feet, it wouldn't be so bad, though I would prefer there was no sidewalk on that block, because the hotel at the corner, they can use the crosswalk. There is no parking on our side of Milpas, so there's nobody that's going to park there and want to go to that recreational field. And if anybody does park there, either on side streets or, I don't know the name of the other street that borders the park, but they are all within crosswalk area, so they can cross over. And there's really no reason for anybody to be walking on that side of the street. And there are a lot of street people that hang out at that park, and there were more before. But if the bathrooms open up there is going to have to be some type of security because they'll be camping out there as they were a couple of years ago. We have incidents. I believe there was just a police report filed last week or even this week on our property. A street person came over wanting to use the phone, and now he's been kind of harassing my tenant over there. If there were a sidewalk in front of there, I think it would be even worse because people would feel that they are entitled to be there on our property. My 2 minutes are up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I don't know if there's a project still in process to make public comment to, or if you maybe leave your address with staff. If you have a particular question on a project that's undergoing, they could maybe provide you with some information on that. Thank you, so you can stay abreast. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, we have another public speaker for an item not on the agenda, Lauren Floro.
Hi, thank you. I'm actually Kathy's tenant, and the one that she was just referencing with regards to being harassed by the transient person. So he has, over the last few months, there has been a huge uptick in transient activity within the baseball field in particular. Also on the Cabrillo Parkway, right by the bike path. But this one person in particular just is now literally just standing. I know this has nothing to do with you guys, but just to let you know that he is now just in front of the property almost all the time. And to have a sidewalk installed on the residential side when there's really no reason for it whatsoever, not only invites him to be underneath this new lamppost that's going to be installed, but it will effectively be inviting him to legally be on the property. And it's just something that I really feel as though should be reconsidered as part of the project. The sidewalk, the changes to the ADA modifications on the sidewalk that is actually the Milpas side that you guys are discussing today, outside of renovations to the bathroom that could potentially allow the transient population that is ever growing in the area to just feel as though that they are more welcome there, especially with such lack of police enforcement or control down on South Milpas. So thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Can you hold 1 second? Commissioner Schwartz, do you have a question
Thank
for the
you for
speaker?
being here. Aside from the sidewalk, but in terms of your feeling of safety and security, and I can tell you're uncomfortable with this situation, have you spoken with one or more of our restorative police officers? We have Officer Burley or Hove, who specialize in dealing with the homelessness issue and homeless persons specifically, and also whether Path Casa Esperanza might have this individual as one of their clients.
He is a client of Path,
But I
yes.
encourage you to make those connections because you're right, the Planning Commission really isn't the best interface for you, but I'm hoping that through one or more of those other resources, you and the property owner could get some much-needed assistance.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get those names, but thank you.
Yeah, Hove and Burley. Those are the two officers who in our police department are restorative police officers, and they specifically have assignments to effectively interact with our homeless population and the community at large in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Floro, I think we have another question. Commissioner Lodge, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment that the hope is that with providing more activities for non-homeless people there, that it will be less inviting to the homeless.
For sure.
And there are no plans to have the restroom open any more than when there would be people around to make sure that the use of that facility isn't abused.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally understand that and respect it. And I think that that project within itself is a great project. Again, it's just what part of the non-agenda item, which is the residential side, sidewalk installation. That
I appreciate your concern, and do get in touch with staff about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for both of your comments. Anyone else? Public speaking? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Our next item on the agenda is a consent item for application from the Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department. And this is a consent item. So first order of business, Ms. Galarte, will be from staff.
Yes. Would you like to waive the staff report, or would you like
I was-
Ms. Grant
I
to do a
was
staff report?
going to suggest that we waive the staff report.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, we have a first and a second to waive the staff report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will waive the staff report. So our next step then are any questions that commissioners would have of staff on this application. Commissioner Jordan, I believe you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just have one question for staff. It has nothing to do with this project or support of it, but I know there was a lively discussion on the basketball court down there, and council did approve it, but you've got a line in the staff report that it's not on the plans because of funding issues. Where would it go on those set of plans if you had if you have the funding in the future? Is there a spot being projected that it will sit, that will have a footprint for that, or are we backing ourselves into a corner where we'd have to take something out to put it in?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Jordan, there is a location, and it is essentially right here, a junior high size basketball court, and it was designed within the plan and has been removed due to funding issues.
Okay, but there's nothing on the proposed plan that would, cause undue expense if funding arose and the political will was still there to put it right back in.
That is correct.
Perfect.
It could be phased in at a later date. It's
Okay.
just not part of the project today.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Higgins?
For staff, I guess the question I have is programming. How much, give us a sense of the additional frequency of programming that's anticipated with these sports, baseball and soccer.
Want me to repeat that with my mic on? Sorry.
Thank you.
Could you give us a sense of the frequency increase with regard to youth sports or other activities as a result of the project?
Chair and Commissioner Higgins, Rich Hanna, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. So currently at the park, we're already actively working with pony baseball and youth soccer groups in the outfield. The park itself, the outfield area, is currently programmed in the spring full-time leading into our adult activities. The additional activity that we would envision being in the park would be bringing in a lot of these outside fitness groups that you currently see on the other side of Cabrillo Boulevard up in Shoreline Park. Several years ago, the department had to go in and regulate because there were so many of those groups. We had to identify spaces for them to be and permit that. And we feel that this would be a great venue for them to come, drop in, not overly commercialize the area, but increase the activity in the park throughout the entire day.
So more passive activity. I don't know how you qualify, fitness stuff as passive or active, but my question is, can you increase the frequency or the intensity of the use with baseball and soccer as a result of the project? Do you expect to do that at all?
In specific to baseball and soccer, it wouldn't increase. Actually, it would increase the intensity as it relates to soccer because we're going to grade the entire outfield, so we'll have the ability to add kind of unformalized youth soccer fields there. As far as the baseball, the pony baseball, we're maxed out with the ability to use that diamond as it is right now.
Softball, and so it's full capacity.
Correct.
And then I didn't quite understand the soccer response. You can program it more for soccer with this project design? Well, I guess maybe it doesn't matter about the design. You can put more soccer games on that field, correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, Commissioner Higgins, we have the ability to put in, I think your plan shows 3 practice areas for youth soccer, say U8 or U10.
Okay, my last question is, what's been the feedback from baseball? And this stems from the comment that was made during the site visit that at one point there was an opportunity or plan to include an outfield fence, and I just wanted to find out what, did they, I imagine pony baseball or the baseball or softball folks thought that would be great, but it got pulled back from because of HLC And so my question is, what was their interest in that? Should we pursue it? And can you do some kind of a temporary fence and put sleeves there, and then during games put some sort of rollout? I don't know. Give us some background as to that technical
Sure.
aspect of the project.
Sure,
or adding
Mr.
that
Chair and
feature.
Commissioner Higgins. So the outfield home run fence was essentially something that we had proposed initially to kind of enhance that overall player experience. It would also provide a delineation between the active ball field area for softball, for adult softball, and other activities in the park. The group that would have benefited the most from that was our adult softball league, because they're the only ones that would have been able to actually physically hit the ball over the proposed home run fence as it was proposed in the original plans. With the fence not going in, we have not received any sort of feedback from Major League Softball, which is who we work with. It was desirable. If we can add it in at a later date, they would support that, but they didn't feel it was a detractant to continuing to have high-level adult softball leagues here in this field.
The distance is the same for pony baseball leagues, or I gather by your response the softball fence is going to be further out than baseball, or no?
That's correct. The adult softball field outfield home run fence was proposed to be 300 feet, and if you go by Mackenzie Park, I believe the pony baseball field home run fences are like half of that distance.
Thanks.
Commissioner Schwartz, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is about fencing. Do we have a visual or some samples of the new fencing that you talked to us about when we were at the site visit on Tuesday? I think you said, was it wrought iron, Mr. Van Molen? The chain link is going to be changed out for...
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, so the difficulty with fencing in this location is, one, we have to have some type of chain link so when a player runs into that chain link, the energy is absorbed. So what we have done is we've tried to create in areas where we can have the more traditional wrought iron fencing, like along the sidewalks, and blend it in. The example that we're using, the exact detail, is the same fencing that was put along the Chase Palm Park extension project. So we're matching that color and that design, so it's consistent within that waterfront
We have a
area.
visual, do we have a slide for that by any chance, or anything you could put on the overhead? Do we have the overhead over there? What happened to that machine? I don't know.
There it is.
Yeah, I think you're just going to
Oh, I'm sorry, I hate to have you have to come up here, but just maybe we could pass it down. Okay. So you're going to blend basically, or mix, not really blend, but mix the two where, like you said, where due to the athletic activities, you need the chain link, but we'll mix it with this, which will be a little more attractive aesthetically and more, maybe less inclined to require repairs, to have this sort of wrought iron in other areas.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, that's correct.
Okay.
It will last a lot longer,
Okay.
and when people do climb over it, it's less likely to be crushed as chain link is.
Okay, so lower maintenance in that regard as well. Okay, I'll just pass this down. Then my next question to you, and I posed this at the site visit, was to better understand bicycle parking, and let's point out the areas where you're currently planning for it, but I think there's one corner where you hadn't planned at this time for bicycle parking I'd like to discuss with you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, that's correct. We have two locations that we're really focusing bike parking. Currently, there is no bike parking at the site, and we are proposing 16 new spaces. One would be right next to the entry gate for the baseball diamond, the fencing, and that would be 8.
And that's over here?
That
When you say the entry gate, is that? Oh, it's up there, closer to where the
Where
Fess Parker Hotel entrance is more.
It would be basically closer to across the street from the Tri-County Produce is the best way to
Oh,
describe.
Calle Puerto Vallarta, okay.
And then the second location is across the street from the Fess Parker Inn.
So then, and this is what was the question. So this area right here where Milpas and Cabrillo come together, tell me a little bit more about the thinking about why you don't think that's important to have some bicycle parking there as well.
When speaking to transportation staff, we went through the different locations, and what was recommended is having bike parking close to where you might dismount off of the street and close to the sidewalk. We've chosen those two locations because we feel the one by Tri-County Produce is going to be more used by the baseball and softball folks. And then the second location is really the starting point for the jogging or circuit workout area, which encompasses the whole perimeter. So that was our reasoning for those two locations. And one of the reasons why we didn't choose to put it at the corner of Milpas and Cabrillo was that it is a little bit more visible in that location. And so we had concerns with the possibility of carts or storage vehicles being locked to them and becoming a problem. But also just having bikes, because at the location of Calle Puerto Vallarta and Cabrillo, where it's across from Fess Parker, the elevation drops a few feet from the street, so the bikes aren't seen as well when you drive by. Those are our reasonings.
Just to conclude on that topic, if we staff finds, once this project is completed, and we observe, let's say, maybe we even get feedback from the public that they have an interest in parking, or locking up their bicycles here, because this is a very large property. So somebody may come onto the property and want to work out from any one of the three corners, shall we say. Have we designed the project, the enhancements to the property in a way that we could add bicycle parking without it being cost prohibitive?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, our goal, if there is a need for more bike parking, because of the large width of the parkway on Cabrillo Boulevard, we have the ability to place bike parking on the ocean side of that sidewalk.
So we have that flexibility in the design.
Yes.
Okay, if it's warranted. Okay, and then lastly, and I told you I'd be asking about this as well, that lighting. I'd like to better understand the lighting plan, the specific types of lighting, especially night lighting. Well, I guess really that's what we're talking about, is night lighting. But now that we're getting into the winter hours and it gets dark earlier.
So our goal for lighting, we looked at what was existing, and we have that on site. There's only these two lights shown right across from the entry from Fess Parker. And we're also proposing the typical Doma-style light that's in that photograph, which is also on Shoreline Park. Go to the next slide. But if you look at the amount of light that's around the site, you can see the existing, which is the yellow circles, and then you've got the proposed. Some will be proposed on Milpas, which is part of that sidewalk project that was discussed earlier, and then the lights that we are proposing. And the reason we chose this location along the Cabrillo sidewalk is because we felt that was going to be the most likely to be used on a regular basis, because it is an actual pathway, and it's so far away from the street, like we talked about, that really wide parkway, that having that extra lighting there seemed to be the best use of funding. And we looked at potentially lighting the whole site, but funding is not available for that currently.
So it's just a funding issue? It's not any other concern? Not that funding is always an important issue. And the reason I'm asking you about this is, first of all, twofold, really. are we planning for adequate lighting given the community's interest in an increased nighttime use of the ball field? So it needs to be sufficiently lit for safety and safe recreation and just more visitor going there as well. But at the same time, and the Commission has talked about this with other projects, we also want to avoid light pollution into the neighboring businesses and residences there. So how do we strike that balance with literally the technology, the type of lighting that you're planning to use? Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, there has not been a photometric study done on the whole entire site. We did do photometrics for the lighting that we are proposing to ensure that the lighting height and distance spacing would be adequate to light that sidewalk. But as you said, light pollution is a real issue, and we've chosen to light that area and not light the whole entire park. Keep in mind, on I think it's 4 days a week, we have 65-foot tall field lighting that is lit up as well. So there's that will illuminate the site at the same time. And if this becomes an extremely active park, we could look at improving lighting in other areas as needed.
Okay, I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this topic? I'll open the public hearing or questions if they have. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public questions and comments. Question for Mr. Vincent, I guess. Where we are right now in the length of our questioning, I guess we would be able to go to comments from the commissioners if we would like.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the commissioners on the project? Commissioner Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I said, there's nothing not to like here. You could probably, over the course of the past decade, the description of this park kind of wobbles up and down into being used or being dumpy, kind of just on what's going on down there, just like you heard from the residents. And, in my mind, the overriding goal of a park is to be an attractant. And everything you're going to do is going to attract more people. I think that will resolve some of the concerns you hear from the residents, that will increase some of the concerns you hear from the surrounding businesses. I just going to get back on the soapbox for a second. I'm sorry to see that so much input was received on the desire for a basketball court down there, and for whatever reason, funding or whatever, that it's sort of taken a back seat. A park should be an attractant by nature. This particular location of a park also bears the blessing and the burden of being a coastal access attractant also, and should be doing all that it can to enhance the ability of any type of activity to be done down on the coast, whether it is a Sunday art show, whether it's skateboarding, whether it's soccer, softball, or passive recreation. I'm sorry to see that fall off. I hope it comes back. I've been distressed in that discussion on some of the adjoining businesses, particularly the hospitality industry, who in the best of times operate in their locations at the blessing of the community on the waterfront. In the worst of times, when they push back on a location like this to further their business interests, they're operating at the expense of the community. So I hope somewhere down the road we can see not just basketball, but more attractants put into place at this park to allow more people from the entire community to experience outdoor recreation in an oceanfront setting. And I don't think I'm preaching to people who don't get that over there. I think you guys all get that. It's really more just my frustration with how I saw the conversation to where we've come today, back with council and the neighborhood meetings and the neighborhood advisory committee and the Parks and Recs Commission. So again, I think what you're doing is great. I think any step forward is great, and I will support the project, and I'll support any future project. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Higgins?
I guess I just had another question to follow up on what Commissioner
Please.
Jordan asked. Are we missing an opportunity to review a project in its entirety by excluding the basketball courts now, and then leaving that decision on whether or not to install the basketball courts either to staff or the council? Or asked another way, if we wanted to put the basketball courts in later, are we talking about a new CDP and reinventing this process, and therefore having it cost more time and energy with regard to that change?
Commissioner Higgins, I mean, that may be an opportunity where we come back for like a level 3 or level 4 substantial conformance determination, depending what it is that the scope of the project is.
Okay. Ms. Galante, then that would also have to go through design review, even though it's a level 3?
Yes. Any change would have
as
to go.
this project is done
Yes.
already? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to first compliment the Parks and Recreation staff. Great job. I think this is a beautiful project. It's a long time coming. It's been an underused and misused property of ours and resource for the community. So I think this is going to be an enhancement for locals, visitors, and it's tough. It's a large, prominent, very exposed recreation property that has both upsides and downsides, as you've described, in terms of it being an attractive nuisance to some, but also an underused community resource for many. So I think you've done a great job. I'm glad that we are at a point where we can at least get this done. And if there are additional interests and needs that arise, that's why I was asking you about, for example, the bicycle parking, but it also could apply to a basketball court if there is the political will and funding to do that in the future, whether it's at this site or somewhere else. So I just want to commend staff, and I too will be supporting the discretionary application for a coastal development permit today. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with comments? Before I have a few. Thank you again for putting this project together and all the work that was involved. And can see going to get a lot of utilization out of it. I think both for our current residents plus visitors, because there are currently 2 hotels right across the street and another one coming up near the freeway off ramp on Milpas Street. And, with people coming down to the beach and renting bikes or taking complimentary bikes from the hotel, it's going to get more and more active. We didn't mention it today, but our understanding from the trip that the field trip is that there is a city project that will be constructing bike paths along Milpas there on the Milpas side at the park side of the street. Is that correct? Coming up in the future, a bike path dedicated.
Chair Campanella, yes, that is correct. The project is titled the Lower Milpas Sidewalk Safe Routes to School Project. But as part of that project, there will be a Class 2 bike lane that would go along this side of Milpas Street on the park side. On the non-park side, it would be a Class 3 facility, which is also known as a shared facility with vehicles. And then from Milpas, when you pass the intersection at Calle Puerto Vallarta, there would be an on-street Class 2 facility in that direction.
Okay, so I would just want to take note for the future, not for this particular project, but with that increased and more accessible bike travel down to that corner versus none. No, you're a risk taker now because you're out in the lane of traffic. That there really may be a reason in the future to get the bike parking on that particular corner because of maybe the variety of ages safe paths to school and bikeways to school, you're going to see a lot of different people use that pathway. And having that exercise area right there, really invites people to get off the bike and do the pull-ups or push-ups or whatever you're going to do. And that would be the only spot that doesn't have bike parking. You'd have to park it at one of the other stations. So I think given what's going to happen in the future, hopefully you could roll that in, or, maybe as part of that upcoming project, they would give you a helping hand to get that other station in. So that's just a little background, I think, for the public, and supplementing a little bit what our other commissioners have said. Commissioner Jordan, do you have a comment?
I'm just ready to make a motion if you're ready.
Okay. So we have a motion to be made for a coastal development permit as outlined on page 1 of the staff report.
I'll just move approval of the project, making the findings for the PR zone and approving the coastal development permit, also making the findings as shown in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion. Second?
And adopting the conditions of approval. Thank you.
Okay. Revised motion. We have a second. Okay. Commissioner Thompson made the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, thank you very much. This will also have a 10-day appeal period. Okay, we'll take a minute for people to set up here, and we'll go on to our next item. Okay, our next item is, the purpose of the hearing is an applicant is appealing the decision of the staff hearing officer for requested front setback modification. And is staff ready to make a presentation? Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Campanella, Planning Commissioners. My name is Andrew Perez, Planning Technician. And as you said, we are here today to hear an appeal of the staff hearing officer's decision regarding a front setback modification at 1547 Shoreline Drive. And here's an aerial of the property. It's a bluff top property at lot size 22,600 square feet. And existing development on the site consists of a 4,000 square foot single family dwelling with an attached 516 square foot 2-car garage. Also has a rear patio deck and a bluff top deck with an accessory structure below. So here's a site photo of the front portion of the property. And this property is unique in that the front property line is not at the edge of the public sidewalk as we're accustomed to seeing. The red line you see on the photo is the approximate location of the property line, which is 11 feet back from that edge of the public sidewalk. And we'll see this in plan view in a couple of slides. So the overall project description is a proposal to update the facade of the entire dwelling, expansion of the rear patio deck, and addition of 92 square feet to the existing garage. And a front setback modification is required because the proposal looks to expand the garage by expanding it 4 feet into the 20-foot required front setback. So here's a view of the garage portion of the site plan. And as you can see in the blue hatched area is the proposed expansion area. So it'd be done by pulling the front edge of the garage out towards Shoreline Drive by 4 feet. The existing garage does meet the 20-foot setback requirement and is located approximately 31 feet from the edge of the public sidewalk. And so as you can see in some of these dimensions, with the 4-foot addition, it would be just just over 27 feet from the edge of the sidewalk. So a little project history. The project was reviewed by the Single Family Design Board in May of this year. And while they were supportive of the project as a whole, they were not supportive of a 4-foot encroachment into the front setback. However, in lieu of the 4 feet, they were supportive of a 2-foot encroachment into the front setback. And with those comments, the project was forwarded to the staff hearing officer. And while staff prepared the report for the modification hearing, we looked at 3 main points while determining supportability of the modification. The first being potential impacts to the visual openness of Shoreline Drive. And this was especially relevant because a portion of Shoreline Drive in close proximity to this project site is designated as a scenic resource in both our general plan and the local coastal plan. Staff also looked at whether the proposal to provide the property with a 23-foot deep garage was an appropriate improvement and whether it met the intent of the zoning ordinance. And while staff did feel that it was meeting the intent of the zoning ordinance in that it provided 2 covered parking spaces, staff felt that a 23-foot depth garage is a bit excessive, seeing that the standard garage tend to have a 20-foot depth if they're being constructed today. So with that in mind, staff recommended a denial of the project as requested by the applicant. However, as an alternative, did offer support for a modification 1 foot into the front setback. Staff chose 1 foot because this would allow the property to have a garage with a depth of 20 feet, which, as I said, is pretty standard for garages today. And we felt that that was appropriate because we'd be providing the covered parking while minimizing the impact to Shoreline Drive in terms of the visual openness. So going forward, the staff hearing officer agreed with staff and denied the request as submitted. However, as an alternative, rather than the 1 foot encroachment, the staff hearing officer approved a 2-foot encroachment, which was an additional foot to what staff recommended, but was in line with what the Single Family Design Board recommended at their hearing. And so the show made the findings that the 2-foot encroachment was consistent with the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance and was an appropriate improvement while minimizing the visual impacts to Shoreline Drive. And within the 10-day appeal period, the applicant appealed the staff hearing officer's decision, and they based their appeal on 3 main points. First of which, that a 2-foot addition to the existing garage with a 19-foot depth was not sufficient in providing a functional 2-car garage. Their second point stated that there are several properties along Shoreline Drive that are non-conforming to the front setback. And their final point was that due to the uniqueness of this property with the land between the edge of the sidewalk and the actual front property line, that although that land isn't counted towards the front setback, it functions as the front setback would. And in response to the appeal, staff felt that a 20-foot garage is the standard today, so we felt that the 2-foot addition would suffice in that regards. And as to the non-conforming properties, there are actually 7 along Shoreline Drive that the applicant identified, 6 of which were legally non-conforming, and 7th was granted a front setback modification. But in that situation was a little bit unique in that the front setback modification increased the amount of unobstructed front setback area. And with that said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal and affirm the staff hearing officer's decision to approve a 2-foot encroachment, making the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. And here are the findings you would make. And that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you put that prior screen up, please? Okay, so that's supporting the staff hearing officer's decision. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Anything else from staff or the staff hearing officer? Okay. We have the applicant appellant here, Mr. Oshner, if you'd come up. I have about 15 minutes for you. Is that sufficient, do you think?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, yes, that 15 minutes should be fine.
Okay, thank you. And then say your name and for the record, please.
My name is Tom Oxner, project architect. Okay, is it? Oh. So what we're here for is basically one more foot. This proposal, as you know, was originally for the 4 feet. The 2 feet that was granted, it wasn't enough to get the project to work. The thickness of the wall on this front of the building is this thick. The architectural design creates a wall that's this thick. So even with a 3-foot encroachment, the 19-foot clear garage will be 21. And 21 is still not ideal. It barely works for these particular owners. The SFDB did review the project back in October. Before their review, staff was there, and staff basically said, we don't support the 4 feet. We only support a 1-foot encroachment. And I've been to enough design review boards that the design reviewers really look to staff in many cases when it comes to modifications into setbacks, especially the front yard setback. So for SFDB to push it out to 2 feet, I thought said something, and I really suspect that I heard some discussion that was in favor of maybe the 3 feet or even the 4 feet. I think the justification for this request can be found within the immediate neighborhood itself. The neighborhood has a set precedence for several properties which encroach much closer to the front yard than what we are proposing. Furthermore, there is an extra buffer between the right-of-way and the actual sidewalk that provides additional separation above and beyond the comparative distances that we see in the neighborhood. In other words, even if you approve the 3 foot, the net result will be far exceeding the 20-foot requirement and what exists currently there in the neighborhood. Right here we have the existing situation. There's approximately 31.5 feet from the inside edge of the sidewalk to the face of the garage right there. This exhibit I prepared on request from the site visit. This exhibit shows the property lines as I superimpose them onto an aerial photo. The interesting thing about this is that it kind of reveals what's going on out there. And there is, right at the point of the subject parcel, the road easement goes from 80 feet down to 50 feet. So what happens is you get this right-of-way, which is pulled back in, and currently the garage is 20 feet back from it. The area out here, because of the way that it abuts this property line here, has very little value for widening or road improvements in the future. And it's very likely that if this is granted, that the openness will remain for quite some time. Let's see here. This exhibit, I was asked to show the dimensions from both the west side and the east side of the garage. So this is for the 4-foot encroachment. As you can see, the distance from the garage on the westerly measurements from the corner of the garage are slightly more, but because of the way that the actual road improvement converges on the property line, the distance from the edge of the sidewalk to that building is slightly less than on the east side. Let's see. So the first...
Yes.
Mr. Oshner, yes.
A question for you. If you go back to that slide, I'll call it the lower corner of the garage as currently exists, the setback from the right-of-way to the face of the current garage is how many feet?
About 21 feet.
Okay, so there, currently it's 1 foot out of the 20-foot setback required. It goes
Right.
1 foot.
And my survey shows the easterly corner is right at 20 feet.
Okay.
And the westerly corner is at 21 feet.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing we tried to do was to look within the building. Unfortunately, the rear wall, the entire garage is concrete block, solid grouted concrete block. Behind that, there is a bedroom which is narrow with a bathroom. To push through that wall would be something to consider, but then to end up with a bedroom that doesn't work and then a bathroom that's piggyback to it is not something that is desirable. So that's why this foot means so much. Let's see here. Okay, so this exhibit shows the properties that we looked at. We did a study along shoreline, and we looked at just the structures that were obviously within the front yard setback. The property that staff was referring to, I believe it was 1521 right here. And the reason, I think as they stated, they made a finding where the unique conditions of the modification offset the diverse effects of the encroachment. And I'm suggesting that that might be the case here as well. Let's see here. So I'm going to go through these quickly because these are in your handout. So I'm just going to rattle off the numbers that I found. 15 foot from that structure, 13 foot there. This is 14 foot. This is 15 foot, 13 and 15 on these two, 13, 16. And then I want to finish with this exhibit. This is an interesting one. So what I did was I took the neighboring homes. There's a vacant lot directly to the west of our parcel, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes on the same side of shoreline. I offset the line of the inside of the sidewalk, offset it 20 feet, and then looked at string lining where we sit within the context of the neighborhood. So if we go right down the line, this is a garage that's in the setback. These buildings are all hovering around the 2 to 5 foot distance back from that. Our structure is 10 feet back. It's 20 feet plus 11 feet to the garage. So if we were to push this out a little bit more, it would still have more buffer and space than what we've got in the immediate neighborhood. And I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any members of the public that wish to speak on this, so we'll close the public hearing. Back to the commission for questions of either staff or Mr. Ochsner. Okay, we'll go left to right here. Mr. Higgins?
Could the applicant come back up? Yeah, Mr. Ochsner, the last slide you had, could you put that back up?
Yes.
So just to clarify, that's an effective setback line really from the back of the setback, not necessarily the property line.
Right. That red line there is just a I drew a line that parallels the back edge of the sidewalk, which is normally where the right-of-way is.
That's a kind of a visual assessment tool.
It's a visual assessment tool to see how we compare to the neighborhood in terms of just open space in front of the building.
That's a useful tool. I think I would have liked to see the east of that a little bit more, but that's okay, and not a big deal.
Well, the east of that it jumps up to the narrower.
It's more so what we're talking about. But the other slide you had that shows the property lines, the actual property lines.
Yes, let's go
Slides back. Could you put that up?
This one.
I guess the issue, as I see it, is if the city were ever to expand the right-of-way, because they have the rights to do that now, because they've got the width, right? They wouldn't.
Well, but they don't have it in the 50-foot wide portion where it squeezes. So even if they were to expand it, they would have to flare up and meet that other neighborly property line.
Unless they took property.
Unless they took property. If they took property, it would put this house directly, the neighboring house to the east, if they widened it to 80 feet, would be right on the right-of-way.
Right,
literally on it.
That's what I was going to get at. It looks like if in the fact what we're talking about is a technical issue with regard to the setback. I get it, but I think the issue is it's not really, how do I put this? It's more of an effective setback because it's saved space for a right-of-way expansion that, if it were actually going to happen, would result in a more property coming off the property to the east, which exacerbates the condition we're trying to prevent. So that wasn't a question, sorry, but I appreciate the slide.
Okay, thank you. See, Commissioner Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stay right there. I'm going to be right back to you. Staff, can you remind me the 20 by 20 we're talking about that's usual? Is that an interior dimension or an exterior dimension?
That's typically an interior dimension.
Interior
20
dimension.
feet clear.
And then, so if that's an interior dimension, the exterior finished wall that's outside of that, and typically, if it was a flat lot, new construction, whatever, without contention, would have to be on the setback line or away from the setback line, correct?
That's correct.
And that would be regardless of what type of architectural treatment somebody wanted to bring. If I was building an adobe wall that's a foot thick, that just means I'm scooting the rest of everything back to get my 20 by 20. If I'm doing a 2 by 4 wall, I'm scooting it all forward, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Oxner, then, what is the current depth on the ground right now?
Commissioner Jordan, the current depth of the inside of the garage, from interior drywall to interior drywall, is 19 feet.
19 feet. Okay. So, I guess just the dumb question I want to ask is, why do you need more than 20 feet by 20 feet when everybody else gets along with that?
Okay. Well, I don't know that everybody gets along with that. I designed
let me rephrase that.
a lot of
I get
homes.
along fine with 20 feet by 20 feet when I remodeled. I park a car, I walk down the side. I got your comment in there. You want to walk around the car on all four sides, but I would say most people probably live with a space in their garage where they walk down the sides of the car and don't necessarily circle on all four sides. So what is driving this quote-unquote need to have all this extra space?
Commissioner Jordan, that's a good question. By the way, a lot of people don't use their garage because they're shallow and they can't get around.
Okay.
My client, he's a farmer from Bakersfield, and he drives the most popular truck in America, and a Ford F-150, a four-door. And I've got the brochure for it in my briefcase. It's 20 feet, 3 inches.
Okay.
He can't park in there. In fact, he could barely, even if he pulls it in his garage, if we do get the 3 feet, he's got to make sure that he lets the passenger out before he goes in the garage.
Even though you have a much wider garage than I do.
Deeper?
Wider.
Well, wider.
Don't you
Oh,
have
yeah.
a 23-foot garage?
Yes, it's wide. Yes.
So I have a 20-foot wide garage, and I wouldn't expect to be able to get a passenger out after I pulled into the garage, but you actually have 3 extra feet, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the passenger side's on the right, and the width there is on the left.
So, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The yellow lines on that slide are the property lines. Is that correct? And so the properties to the east of the one that you're working on, their property line is actually at the back of the sidewalk.
Commissioner Lodge, yes, that's about right from what I can see.
Okay, and it looks as if it's the same across the street. So what, Mr. Oxner, our staff, what is the distance between the existing front of the garage and the back of the sidewalk? I'm just trying to get these dimensions clear.
Oh, yes, let's go there. Okay, so Commissioner Lodge, I think I can answer that question. Could you repeat that, please? Okay, so this
I
is
can't quite make it out.
this is the sidewalk here.
Yeah.
I might be able to. I think I can here. There's a. Let's see.
It's hard to see. There you go.
Okay, so like
Oh,
that.
there you go.
See that now?
So if this property were like its neighbors, it would have, you said 31.
Right, 27.7, 27.7 and 4.0, right? Is that the answer to the question?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
The existing garage to the sidewalk is
Okay.
a combination of 27.7 and 4.0?
That's right. So it would be 31 feet 7.
Okay, okay. So from the front of the existing garage to the back of the sidewalk is 31.7.
31.7.
Okay. And 20 feet is what is required. A 20-foot setback. Okay, but this property has a different property line, right-of-way line. Okay, I want to think about that. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, please.
Yeah, I've got two questions. One, Mr. Oshner, just to confirm, the back wall of the garage is concrete block and would require substantial structural demolition in order to move the garage further back into the house.
Commissioner Thomas, yes, I have the structural drawings here of the house. It's the major shear wall, and it's 8-inch block, solid grouted all the way to the floor diaphragm above.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Now I have a question for the staff. Is there any known plans for the city to widen Shoreline Drive in that vicinity and take advantage of the right-of-way that exists in front of this house?
Commissioner Thompson, it is not known at this time if the city has any plans to widen Shoreline Drive in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Oxner, my first question is from the letter that you sent. It's dated October 20th. I'm not quite clear on your ultimate position of what you're asking for in the number of addition, the feet addition. On the one hand, your letter says that we really need at least a 3-foot addition, but then I also thought I heard you say today 3 feet, 4 feet. So between 1, 2, 3, and 4, where are you and your client's preferred position on this?
Commissioner Schwartz, let me clear that up. The application was originally submitted for a 4-foot extension.
Okay.
Staff came back originally and said, we're only going to give you 1 foot. And then the SFDB bumped it to 2 feet. And then my clients had to make a decision whether they should just abandon it or just lay their cards on it and say, look, if we have 3 feet, we can do it. If we have 3 feet, and we were 1 foot off. So what we're here for, even though this exhibit shows 4 feet, this exhibit is from the original drawings that were submitted. So we're representing the project before you, saying that we're asking for 1 more foot to what the modification officer has approved. We're not looking for the entire 4 feet. We see that there's pushback. Mm-hmm. But the 3 feet would actually just work and would entice the owners enough to move forward with the improvements that they want to and include a usable garage within the context of this improvement that they're going to make on that property. The improvement that they're going to make is a significant improvement. It's going to upgrade the quality of that home for quite some time. And to think that it could be accompanied with a garage that isn't attractive to use, I think would be a detriment to the community.
So when we were out at the site, there's a large oversized vehicle, can't remember if it's a Range Rover, something along that line, currently parked on the left side, if we're looking at the garage, on the left side, and then you have some type of a large gas grill or something stored on the right, and then there were some other items. I can't remember exactly what they were. Not another vehicle, in other words. So where do they park their other large Ford truck now?
In the driveway.
In the driveway. Mm-hmm. Okay, my other question to you is I'm just not quite clear. So let me point this out. This area of the garage, I want to call it like a pop-out. I don't know what the technical term is. You can tell me as an architect. This area right here is where the driver's side door swings out and open for someone to get out into it. So it's a way to be able to get in and out of the vehicle on that side of the vehicle. But this little area right here prevents, because this is solid and then this is open, right? So a car currently, regular size or otherwise, can't drive straight in here to get closer to this wall, leaving more space in between two vehicles. I mean, that's the issue over here too, right? This is blocked. You have wall cabinets over here, but they're flush. So in other words, the pull-in space or square footage for any size vehicles is here. This is it. So my question to you is, in redesigning and reconstructing the garage, help me understand why you need these blocked out areas here and you can't open the whole width of the garage as many garages are now, especially as they're rebuilt. You know, to provide that maximum width that really represent the walls, the two sides of a garage.
Commissioner Schwartz, let me switch to the floor plan.
Okay.
And I think maybe this will help. So right now, the garage depth-wise is from the back wall here to the existing point here. This is 19 feet. So the proposal is to push the exact wall of the garage forward towards shoreline out some distance.
Yeah, to get greater depth.
To get greater depth. And so the location of this door could be moved. You're absolutely right. It could be moved to the west to make maneuverability more easily. I think that's something that I could look at. I'm still concerned about just the actual depth of the
Yeah,
the
so
garage
you're
for the
saying
vehicle.
your clients need the depth. Yeah, I see. Okay. But you could remove, what you're saying is redesigning, you can remove these, I call them blocked areas, I don't know what else to call them, that either prevent two large oversized vehicles from pulling in and having access, let's even say just from the driver's side out, or as we see in many garages in Santa Barbara, where somebody has to pull in at an angle, a smaller vehicle, pull in at an angle and then straighten out inside a garage, which is very hard, of course, if there's anything else inside a garage, anything else stored. So you're saying you can remove these if you are allowed to push out whatever the amount is, 1, 2, 3 feet. And that would give you your clients more maneuverability inside the garage, even though I know you're still asking for greater depth.
Yes. Commissioner Schwartz, that would be helpful, and I think that's a great idea. That's something that we could study to help with whatever depth we end up with.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. So you mentioned that there are these 7 neighboring properties, and only one of them, I think you said the 7th of the 7, and I don't know if that's the 1525 Cliff Drive, had an exception. Help me understand exactly what you said. You said it pretty quickly. There's allowed an increase in the obstructed front yard area, and I don't know what the circumstances were there, but can you go back over that one example that you called out that I think you said is closest to the current project we have today? And
Yeah, Commissioner
yeah,
Schwartz.
could you go back over the details there?
Yeah, it was this property you can see on the
Is that 1521?
1521
Did I get
shoreline.
the address right? Okay.
And so it reduced the amount of encroachment into the front setback by the granting of the modification. So it was closer to the street, and then we granted the modification for remodel of area within the setback, and it actually improved the situation from a setback perspective.
And the rationale, can you help me understand a little more about the rationale? What was staff or the decision-making body's rationale for that? I don't even know if it came to Planning Commission. I don't recall, but I was on at the time. But anyway, help me with that background. Do you have a backstory there for us?
Commissioner Schwartz, I don't know if he has the backstory, but the thought would be that since it reduced the amount of encroachment into the front yard, it improved the situation. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it's 13 now. So in this, say, the previous situation, it provided a 10-foot setback. The remodel and project ended up, the end result was a 13-foot setback. So I would assume that's why it was approved, because it increased the setback from the street.
Okay. Okay, I think those are my questions for now. As I hear my colleagues deliberate as well, something else may come to mind. Thank you.
Back to Commissioner Jordan.
Yeah, don't let this go. So, Mr. Oxner, if you could put back up your site plan. So, I think in the plans we have in front of us, there's only what you're planning to do. There's not an existing site plan. Is that right?
I have an existing site plan.
But here's my question. Here's where I want to go. And this whole pass-through driveway situation, is that all then going to be newly constructed? Does it all move forward? Does this circle move forward 4 feet because you're coming 4 feet here and you need to get the same width of hardscape for a turnaround there, so everything moves forward 4 feet?
Commissioner Jordan, I'm going to switch up a little bit. Right now, there are planters on either side of the garage. And the depth of those planters are more than the depth that we will be pulling forward. So we won't have to reconfigure the driveway at all in order to accommodate the increased depth of the garage.
So there's will that existing driveway and hardscape stay the same? Or
stay the same.
Stay the same. Mm-hmm. So literally you're just taking up the space that's in the dirt of those planters there.
Exactly.
Or you're proposing to.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I want to read between the lines here a little bit, so to speak. But before I get there, I've got a question for you. Nobody else has got their light on. In looking in the garage, there were a set of upper cabinets at the back wall, and there was a vehicle that was parked that could nose under those cabinets. The vehicle that cannot park in there currently, if it were to pull in there now, would it need those cabinets? Would it be higher than the current cabinets, meaning those cabinets would have to be removed to park that vehicle? The Ford 150.
Chair Campanella, now typically the transportation department does allow for storage above a certain height in a garage, as far as so a vehicle can go beneath it.
That's correct. That's the situation we saw there with the vehicle that was parked at the time, but not the vehicle that you're having a problem with, as I understand.
So, if this truck could fit in the garage anyway, I mean, it can't even fit in the garage. So if that truck went in the garage, you couldn't even close the garage door on it right now. So to be honest with you, I don't know how the hood of that truck relates to the bottom of those cabinets. But I certainly know that if there was an opportunity to put that truck in the garage and it did interfere with those cabinets would be gone in a second.
Okay, so your distance that you need is based upon the constructed wall, not the cabinets are in place.
Absolutely.
You're not trying to get the extra room because you want to keep the cabinets may now abut the hood of the vehicle. Okay.
That is correct.
And then a couple more, I guess. Question for why don't you stay up there for a second for staff? As the house is currently sited with the right-of-way line, parking would be prohibited on that curved driveway because it's in the setback from the right-of-way. It's beyond the side, I think, beyond the right-of-way from the back of sidewalk, but it is within the 20 feet of the right-of-way, so it would not be able to park there, correct?
That's correct. Parking in the front setback is prohibited.
Okay. And there are no parking places on the public parking on the street in front of this property?
That's correct. It's all red curbed.
And we currently have a vehicle that cannot fit inside the garage. I'm assuming that's correct. So what does he do to park the vehicle beside park it off-site, I guess, is sort of a question. Is there, I wanted to confirm that's the situation. You know, we don't make rules, I guess, for particular vehicles or modification, but we should consider what a standard utilization would be for someone, a member of the public. So let me keep that in mind. The other thing we're looking at is the right-of-way line is, how can I say, it's curvilinear. This I'm reading between the lines. It's curvilinear has a greater separated distance from the back of the concrete sidewalk as in this particular illustration, I guess, as you go to the east. It starts to create a greater difference between the right-of-way line and the back of sidewalk. And I'm looking at if perhaps that were a straight line rather than a curved line, there would be some additional setback area to the face of the proposed garage on the, I'll call it east, is that correct? If I'm looking at the top of the diagram?
The east, yes.
Okay. Now, currently on the lower part or west, there is a 21-foot setback, I believe, to the face of the garage because of that curvilinear condition. So at that point, which the point I made or asked for information when we were out there, essentially at that corner, the western corner of the garage, your request for 3 feet versus 2 feet actually gets you to 24 feet in total. So this corner with 2 feet could, if we restricted it to 3 feet, this corner at least is within the tolerance because you already have a foot setback. You're in a 21-foot setback right now. So to go to 23 would require 2 feet at the corner, 2 additional feet.
Senator Campanella, but that would assume that the wall would be non-parallel with the existing structure.
No, I understand. I'm just picking the corner.
Yes.
Okay. But then we also have a line that if it goes parallel to the sidewalk, fans out on the eastern side of the property if you were to draw it parallel. I know it's not there, but the right-of-way line gets further and further away from the sidewalk as you go to the east. Mm-hmm. If it were the same setback as the west, you'd also have a foot or two that you could use to move the garage without violating the 20-foot setback. If that were more of a parallel line to the sidewalk rather than curvilinear more towards the unit, that right-of-way line. Hope I'm not confusing everybody, but I'm just looking at the lines here to see, are we talking about 2 feet, 3 feet, average distance? There seems to be a condition out here that is irregular, okay, in a number of ways compared to the other properties, if I judge this diagram correctly. Okay, it's not like I'm getting into comments, but that's the end of my questions, Commissioner. One more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An additional question arose, Mr. Chair, from hearing your questions. Mr. Oxner, if, I know this would not be your client's preference, if the back cabinets in the back part of the garage were to be removed, I don't know what the depth is of those cabinets, where would that put you in terms of the depth of the garage?
Commissioner Schwartz, the cabinets have no impact on the vehicles in the car. The cabinets are above the hood of the vehicles, and the cabinets are an allowed encroachment within the garage itself. So if we could take those cabinets down and suddenly gain 1.5 feet, which is they're 18 inches deep.
That's what I was
We would
wondering.
absolutely do it. It has no impact. If we find that the cabinets would ever interfere with the use of a vehicle in the garage because they were too low, they would either be raised or removed.
So they're even high enough. I know they're high enough now to accommodate the Range Rover. But what about this Ford truck that your client would also like to park there?
Those cabinets are not important.
Okay.
And it's much more important if it is. Yeah, those cabinets would go right away.
I just wanted to
if we had the
understand if
opportunity
I wanted to be clear about whether or not they are a physical obstruction to pulling both of these oversized vehicles in all the way, and then relative to the conversation we're having today and how many feet you would like as a part of this appeal. So,
Commissioner Schwartz, yes, the cabinets are not a part of, and if there was, they're not important to my clients. They would go if they were impeding the ability for him to use a vehicle.
But they are not for either vehicle.
They're not for either vehicle. Oh, Excuse me?
They do not. Okay, well, the appellant can answer this. I just want to be clear that you can your client can pull both of the oversized vehicles all the way in to the back of the garage. I mean, you're appealing because of this additional feet that you want. So my question is, since that's not just a wall at the back of the garage, there actually is extra furniture built onto the wall, it's the cabinets, whether or not this pushes out the vehicles closer to, they can pull all the way, both of them, both of the oversized vehicles.
That's the intent, yes. And if, excuse me, if the cabinet, let me put it this way, Commissioner Schwartz, if the cabinets need to be modified in order to get the front bumper touching the front of the garage, that will happen, and that could easily be conditioned on this. I mean, it's those cabinets get reviewed by the Transportation Department to determine the height. I think it's 5 feet that they can come down, and that's been determined by the Transportation Department.
I've seen many different kinds of cabinets, and some do impede cars of varying heights and sizes from actually pulling all the way into garages.
Yeah.
So I can sense that there's some frustration here with my questioning, but I have seen enough garages in Santa Barbara to know that this is a valid question. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to this curvilinear discussion that you were having. So on the east side, what is the distance, as you had in that drawing, with the 4-foot extension between the property line? I'm not sure. Is that 16 feet 2 inches?
Commissioner Lodge, yes. So if we did have a 4-foot encroachment, the remaining distance between that addition and the right-of-way would be 16 feet, correct?
Okay, and then on the west side, west end?
That would be 16 feet 10 inches.
16 feet 10 inches. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that clear.
The 3 feet, I'll pin at 3 feet for a moment. The 3 feet that you're asking for, given the 19-foot garage, and that 19 feet is clear, or is it to the back of is it back to the garage door, the back of the interior of the garage door, or the physical front of the garage corners, the outside?
Commissioner Campanella, the garage doors are typically set to the inside face of stud, and it reveals the depth of the wall to the outside. So right now we have 19 feet from that garage door, which is the same as the inside of the surface to the back of the garage. It's 19 feet. If we get a 3-foot extension out, that'll give us 22 feet. However, the architecture, it's going to be less than that because the Santa Barbara typically promotes thicker walls. And this particular design is something that would really like to see a foot thickness of wall. So we'll lose a little bit. It'll be 21 and a half feet or so, which will give a large vehicle a little bit of room in front, but it makes it usable. It makes a full-size vehicle able to pull in there comfortably with a little ball hanging and without any obstruction with any cabinets or anything. That's a given to fit in there. But so that becomes the threshold number on what makes sense to spend that kind of effort to increase a garage and to gain something that's usable and meaningful.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Ochsner and staff? Okay, any members of the public that are looking to speak on this? I may have already asked that, but yeah, I did. It's been a while. We've had you up here a while, so we have no public speakers. I'm being real cautious because Julie keeps handing me that note. Don't forget public comments. So I did it twice. I made up for one of them in the past. Anyhow, let's take it back for comments. And again, if we can have some comments relative to, particularly if we can, to either upholding or denying the appeal today. That's where we're heading. So appreciate your comments and leading us in that direction to get a motion. Thank you. Commissioner Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of reading body language, and I guess I'll just get up first and get out of the way. But I will grant that the applicant has a interesting lot configuration in terms of how it relates to the street, the right-of-way, the sidewalk, and where their property line is. But it's not a surprise. And what's unique about that particular stretch of roadway is that the other side of the street has parking spaces. And the visual appearance from either side of the street as a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or a car driver is that the houses then as a result are much farther back from where you are as any one of those people, because it has the additional parkway on the street for parking spaces. The single most architecturally prominent feature of the applicant's house is the garage. It sits right out in front of you. And if I am pretty confident that we could have played a game on Tuesday if I had been there and stood across the street and asked people how far the garage is back from anywhere. Pick a line, the street, the sidewalk, something visually you could see, and nobody would have come up with this 31 feet from the sidewalk to the garage, because it visually doesn't look like that. It visually has an appearance as you're coming down the street going towards City College of narrowing of this garage that's sitting out in front of the residence. And while I agree that we will never take that land back for a purpose, that land still serves a purpose as a streetscape feature and a visual quality that you associate with going up and down that street. This has been all the way up through Design Board and Show Appeal. The same message was given, that the amount of encroachment asked for was too much. My perception too is that is also too much. I actually think that the staff hearing officer was gracious in allowing 2 feet, because I think 20 by 20 interior would have been appropriate. The examples that are given elsewhere on the street, the 6 out of the 7, are static houses. They're not as a result of somebody making improvements and doing a project. They just were on the ground and non-conforming because of whatever reason. They weren't new construction where somebody came in and did a project to make them non-conforming. They were already non-conforming. This one will be driven to non-conforming by modification. Won't be non-conforming anymore, but not. And I just and maybe I watch too many staff hearing officer meetings. I'll admit that up front too, because I see this constant barrage of people acknowledging here's the line and I just need another foot. I need 2 more feet. I need 3 feet. I want my barbecue there because I can see the ocean. I want my garage here because I get more room to walk around the cars, whatever it is. In this particular case, to me, what would be appropriate would be meeting the typical 20 by 20 interior space and giving the applicant that relief. Second choice for me would be agreeing with the staff hearing officer and giving an extra foot, which I think is extremely gracious. And I think either of those, before you even get to the 3 or the 4 feet, when we start quibbling and splitting hairs over feet, any of those push that garage visual further out into everybody else's experience. And it's only doing so for the need of somebody wanting to walk around their vehicles or somebody having a specific size vehicle, not to make what I would call a general needed improvement on a property. So I think I've kind of watched everybody's questions and body postures, so I don't think I'm going to be in the majority on this, but my choice would be probably at best to support the staff hearing officer's decision, at worst to even deny that and go back to granting just 1 foot, and I won't support 3 feet or 4 feet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Higgins, comments?
So I think that's very well put, Commissioner Jordan. I see your perspective there, and I may suggest that you take a break from the modification duties because it's a very good point. I think you do get into a position where you just are constantly beat up. But we have staff with very thick skin, and they do a very good job. And I again see your point. But I am going to disagree with you because of the effective additional setback that's there. And I don't think that even if they wanted to take that right away back, I guess they're not gonna. But if they wanted to take that right away and do something with it, that would just cause more of some pretty dramatic changes to the streetscape. I don't see, haven't seen a convincing exhibit in our packet or here today that what the SFDB was wrestling with regard to some sort of obstructions or encroachments visually on that corner. So without that, I think I would support the applicant's request. I think we do need to decide if we want to encourage people to park in their garages. I think we do, and this will, in this particular case, definitely accomplish that goal. So, those are my comments.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jordan, despite what you see about people's body language, you can be persuasive. The desired, I was trying to get the desired thickness of that front wall pushes it forward further. And this particular design, I know the design is not a part of our purview, but it's rather aggressive the way it sits there. The second story is set back some 20 feet, I believe, from the front of the building. And it's simple and it's white. I also I understand from the site visit that the landscaping that currently exists is not going to be replaced, which is some small palms. They're going to be removed, and low vegetation will be going in instead. So it's just too much of a just too much in your face, the way it is. So I could go for the 2 feet, but maybe I should actually just stick with the with the show, since they say that's not sufficient anyway.
Is that it? Anything else?
No, that's it.
Commissioner Thompson?
Okay. First, I'd like to ask Commissioner Jordan, do you park your truck in your 20 by 20 garage?
No, he doesn't.
My point is that modern vehicles are, whether it's a Ford 150 or any modern vehicle, there are a lot of vehicles that are longer that won't fit in a 20-foot depth garage. So it really doesn't matter what kind of vehicle we're talking about here. A 19-foot garage limits quite a bit what vehicles can be parked in there. So
actually, if you're asking that question, my vehicle would fit in a 20-foot garage.
Will? Okay.
Yeah, maybe yours won't because you have an extra door, but mine will.
Well, maybe you can make a sale of a vehicle today. We can all go home. Anyway, continue, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, mine won't fit.
No
but anyway, the intent of the zoning ordinance is to provide a setback from the public and the street frontage, not from a mythical line in the middle of the yard. Now, if the city were going to be using the entire right-of-way, then the situation would be quite a bit different. But with the property lines, the way they exist, and the property to the east, I cannot imagine the city ever widening shoreline and taking advantage of that additional right-of-way. Who knows why the property lines were set the way they were, but the effective property line is the back of the sidewalk, which is 11 feet further than the property line we're talking about. So if we force the applicant to move the garage further back into the house, that means demolishing a major structural wall, which means major structural demo of the building, which is not really sustainable in the Santa Barbara sustainable way. We advertise that we're a sustainable city, but we're telling the property owner that in order to get a garage big enough to park a modern vehicle in, we're going to require you to demo the front of the building. That's not sustainable. So I would support the original 4-foot request because he's got an 11-foot extra distance from the sidewalk to start with. So that's where I come from. I would uphold the appeal, and like I said, I would even support going to the original 4-foot request.
Okay. I guess today's going to be a mix and match kind of discussion among the planning commissioners. Let me start with kind of my blunt conclusion, and then I'll go back and talk a little bit about it. I'm inclined to support the appellant's request for a 3-foot, not a 4-foot addition. So that is different than the staff hearing officer approval of 2 feet. Now, having said that, and the reason I was asking you, of course, about the cabinets is to see if there's any flexibility there in using the full depth without having the cabinets, but I'll let that go if you're saying it doesn't impede at all, allowing these 2 oversized vehicles to pull all the way in. I want to say something about design. I think it's, in a way, unfortunate that the Planning Commission, whose primary purview is not design, however, we do discuss design often as a part of a fuller set of considerations. And in this case, though the design is done and has been approved, I feel that in expanding the depth of the garage with the new design that's been proposed, I think it makes it a more prominently visible garage, and I think that's unfortunate. If you're looking to expand something that shows to the streetscape on the coastal bluff, I would think that we would want to try to accomplish the converse of that, the opposite of that, and to not make the garage, specifically a garage, be a more prominent feature of a street-facing property. I'm not sure if you can do anything about that, but I think I heard Commissioner Lodge's comments to that effect, and I think that will be unfortunate that if you get further depth with this kind of pseudo mid-century modern look, it's going to make the garage stand out even more. Ironically, the older design that the property owners don't like and are looking to change, I think if the current design were to remain in place and the garage were to be made deeper, it wouldn't even show very much to the streetscape. But that's not what we're contending with today with your new design. We have so many legally non-conforming properties in Santa Barbara because property lines are so varied, our streetscape and public right-of-way is so varied, and I think while we have these templates that we use in our zoning ordinances and our guidelines, there needs to be a property by property consideration. And I think in this unique case, with this unique property, there is the visual flexibility. Not the mathematical flexibility, the visual aesthetics flexibility of pushing the garage out a little bit. I would have preferred the 2 feet, but I hear the argument for 3, and I think I think I can support it. I'm not enthusiastically supporting it. I don't want to say that I'm expressing a referendum on oversized vehicles but let me just say, in a highly urban and even quasi-suburban neighborhood such as this is, I have a little bit of heartburn with the number of oversized vehicles that now seem to be requiring parking in Santa Barbara. But I want to kind of set that aside in my considerations for today. So with that, again, I'm going to come back to where I started, which is that I am inclined to support the request of 3 additional feet, not 4 if we'll see where the vote comes out among my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have just a question prior to my comment. On the opposite side of the street that we spoke about, Mr. Jordan spoke about, has parking available. Is the back of sidewalk the setback line on the opposite side of the street, or is there also a right-of-way line that would be inboard, I'll say, of that back of sidewalk?
The property lines are in line with the edge of sidewalk across the street.
So I understand. I'm sorry. Is that correct? Yes, affirmative? Okay. So if I were walking instead of driving, perceptually, if I'm walking along the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street, a garage door could be 20 feet from back of sidewalk that I'm walking on. This particular garage door now, or as proposed, would be 27 feet setback from the sidewalk. Is that correct? So this garage door is going to be 7 feet further away from my view as I'm walking than the opposite side of the street. Okay. So I don't really see a visual issue as practically entering it because I'm looking from the standpoint of the walker, I think, which is how I'd visualize this. I think there's a lot of issues here that provide the extra space where it's not going to really infringe on any circulation, public views. And the reason for modifications, I guess, is to look at a request that it sort of works without really damaging what the intent may be of the overall zoning ordinance. That's why we ask for modifications. And I think in this particular instance that I would have to go along with the request for the 3 feet. That's about all I have to say, except for a question for Mr. Vincent. Someone here is going to make a motion, and we have an approval finding on page 4. That's approval of the project, the denial of the appeal, and the approval of the staff hearing officer decision. I believe that's what's on page 4. That shows an encroachment of 2 feet. If someone were to propose a motion of a denial, if we were to uphold the appeal of the applicant, is it a matter of changing the 2 feet to 3 feet, or is there some other finding that has to be made? Could we use the same wording as in?
If the motion maker is proposing to go along with the request for 3 feet, then yes, the number 2 would change to 3. If the proponent of the motion is with 4 feet, then 2 would go to 4.
Okay, so that's I didn't know if there were any other conditions or findings that had to be changed. I want to make sure of that before somebody made a motion. The answer is no. We can use or try to.
There wouldn't be any need to change anything else unless the maker of the motion had some other conditions to propose.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments before we entertain a motion? Okay, would someone like to make a motion for us today? No one?
I'll make the motion
Thank you.
that we uphold the appeal and make the approval finding outlined in the staff report and change the number from 2 to 3. And perhaps if you all believe we need to elaborate on the finding because of the irregularities of the lot, the curvilinear front yard, I know I'm not going to get anywhere with Commissioner Thompson on that, but it may be necessary to just bolster the record with regard to the findings. Anybody care about that?
Well, let's hear what you propose.
Is necessary to secure the appropriate improvement on the lot and as requested. And the expansion in the front setback will not adversely impact the visual openness of the streetscape due to its actual distance from Shoreline Drive. In addition, the irregularities of the lot with regard to the curvilinear front yard property line and the excess right-of-way in the front yard also contribute to additional visual openness that will not be sacrificed. Something to that effect.
Period.
And anybody else on the commission that wants to clean that up may, or if you don't feel that's necessary, I'm certainly open to eliminating.
Okay, we have a motion made by Commissioner Higgins with a modification to the findings.
Second.
We have a second discussion on the motion.
There's something inherently wrong when you disagree with him and then he borrows your staff report to read the findings. That's just something wrong with that, isn't there?
Is that the discussion on the motion? Or So I made the second to that motion.
I think that's a workshop discussion. Just keep that on the list. Okay, thanks. Or put that on the list. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor for upholding the appeal?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay. No? Okay, the appeal is upheld by a vote of 4-2. Thank you very much. And again, it'll be appealable for a period of 10 days. Thank you. Okay, let's just get to the administrative agenda. Committee and liaison reports. Commissioner, anybody?
Staff hearing officer?
What's that?
Would you like to start with staff hearing officer?
Start with?
Staff hearing officer?
Yes.
I know it's been a miserable hour and a half already, but we'd like to hear
No,
some
you
more.
you can just jump in.
So
Thank you.
Nothing to report. Pretty much everything made it through a long meeting yesterday except for one continued item. So we may not be back here in this situation for a little bit. I think actually we have one coming up still. Only thing really of interest to me was in the two meetings since I've reported that said be November 9th, and then yesterday's there was about 80 AUD units approved. So just if you're following along on how things are going, there were another 80 units approved, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, could be an agnostic thing, I don't know. So we shall see. But that at least means we're 80 more units on the road to getting some feedback eventually. So that's a good thing. And then I've got 5 minutes worth of water commission if you just want me to go into that.
Yeah, you were. I think you were going to give us a little more information from the last meeting.
Really?
Or maybe you did already. But we appreciate you really filling us in.
I keep talking ad nauseum about this. So
Thank you.
It's really just a repeat of everything you've heard the past 2 times I've told you.
Okay.
Really, the only item of note was council on Tuesday, I guess in my quotations, finally agreed to a turf lawn watering ban, which I think cannot happen too soon. We're currently on a 12-month average conserving at a 36% rate. We need to get to 40% for winter, and by the time we get to next summer, our effective rate during the summer months need to be at least 50% to get to a running 12-month of 40%. Hopefully, the lawn watering ban and the certainly what has to be majority of voluntary participation in that will help achieve that. Kachuma is essentially dead. It's down to the just the remaining dead pool water that can't be used. It's serving only as a conduit to bring water in from other places. There are, of course, the problems I've talked about from bringing water from in other places. The state water pipeline is currently running 24/7 at capacity and will be for the foreseen future. And we are about to, shortly after the end of the year, also run the water level of Kachuma below a level which the pump and the barge can get to. And so a couple projects are in the mix. The first one is they're already scoping increasing the pipe from the barge to the water for hopefully the last segment that will ever be needed. And COMB is taking that lead and will, I'm sure, pass along the cost to the 5-member agencies. And then I've also heard talk about trying to work on a project to increase the size of the capacity pipeline by a second pipeline or something for incoming state water. So right now, the near future for Cachuma, I think as I've said this before, is Cachuma is just a conduit to get from the end of the state water pipeline into our water supply. Unless something turns around that's not on the scopes right now, Cachuma as a storage facility is not really a storage facility. Desal is at best hope now in March 2017 as a first water delivery date to customers. Sometime this month, perhaps, they maybe start pulling water in from the ocean and start a 2-month plus process then of curing the filters and the tubes that need to be done and doing the testing to make sure that what you're getting out of that is water ready for consumption. I think it's a 40-day process after they actually begin pulling water in. They're already talking about expansion. They're on the planning stages of that. So that, again, is more money. And we're also up against a future conveyance issue in that the 3,000 or 3,500 acre feet that we're going to produce initially and push up from the bottom of the system into the freshwater supply is about all we can push and as far as we can push. So to expand and have more water available from Desal, we'll also need to get it to the upper reaches of the city and allow that to flow back down to the bottom half of the city. So in scoping and thoughts there too is how are we going to get water from the Desal facility up to Cater to allow it to flow back down to the rest of the city. So those are running hand in hand. That's all the good news. There's not a lot of good news. You know, the NOAA charts they keep showing show Santa Barbara County still at the epicenter of the drought in the West. So don't see any change in that in the next couple months. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good report. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday's December 7th meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission had 116 Castillo Street before it, the change of the motel from a one-story motel to a 38-room, 3-story hotel. And it's just going to be coming back to the consent calendar. So basically that's on its way. That was before the commission, I think, in July. And so that one is a project that will be going on ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson.
Right. Tuesday, the City Council held an appeal hearing on our denial of a coastal development permit for 1925 Camino de la Luz. Following 2.5 hours of report and discussion, they continued the hearing for further information, primarily focused on the issue of the anti-taking clause in the Coastal Act, looking for more information from the applicant as to what due diligence he did prior to the purchase of the property. And that'll come back to the council to rehear the appeal at some point in the future. We don't know when that is yet.
Okay, I guess just if I can make one comment, Commissioner Lodge spends a good part of her time reviewing what's going on at HLC Design Board, and I do on ABR myself. And those who have not looked at the meetings, it's very interesting when there's a larger project before them, how that process evolves over time between the initial concept to final approval does take a while. And whatever project it is, when it finally gets approved by the design board, the public may not be aware, there are findings that are made on compatibility and impact on historic resources and a number of other findings that have to be made before it can be approved, including any environmental impact or traffic impact specific to that project. So when you do look at projects that are proposed, until they are approved, it really is still more conceptual than reality. And I think it'd be good for the public to watch the hearings to see the process that a project and an applicant has to go through to come out with something most of the times much better than what they went in with in that process that's currently in place for the benefit of the community. So just a comment from observation on reviewing the commissions. Commissioner Schwartz?
Yes, this is not a liaison report, but I wanted to offer my concluding remarks and appreciation for Commissioner June Peugeot, who this would have been her last meeting today, but there's a new grandchild on the way. So that very appropriately was her priority today in terms of what took her away from this duty. But over the last 4 years, I have greatly appreciated her commitment, her knowledge as a longtime professional planner, and her passion for the full role, the full set of responsibilities that are really our obligation in serving the public, serving the community. And I personally have learned a great deal from sitting next to and learning alongside Commissioner Peugeot, and we'll miss her going into 2017. But again, just want to offer my comments of respect and appreciation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I also would like to extend gratitude to Commissioner Peugeot and her hard work here in helping us a lot in something I think we do very good, and that's deliberating. I think we do spend a lot of time and effort trying to come up with the right decision and the right comments. And I think all of us have our contribution to that effect, and I think we do things a lot better by all of us cooperating, as we do, as a real good team. So I've been very pleased to be here in the chairman's seat over the last year, and I thank all of you for your help, especially those who let me know when my microphone's not on, because quite helpful, because otherwise Julie can never record what I say. But I think it's been a great experience, and I think all of us who have not done it should not be concerned about taking a turn, because there's a lot of help here and support, and it really makes you feel good to the way we come out with, or try to come out with, the right decision after deliberating and giving everyone a fair shake. No matter what the size of the project or who the applicant is, everybody gets the fair hearing. So appreciate all of that from all of you. Okay, so we will next be getting together on January 12th. The lunch meeting starts in the 1 o'clock meeting, and I guess we could wish a lot of happy holidays, because there's a lot of them for various religious and nationality holidays that are coming between us and when we next get together. Thank you to staff as well for all your efforts. Appreciate it. Scott? Okay. Okay, happy holidays. We are adjourned.